Hi, my name is Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer and motivational speaker. Today we're going to talk about the book Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. I had the opportunity to listen to the book Smarter, Better, Faster by Charles Duhigg on my phone. I love audiobooks on the phone through the library. Best opportunity ever. If you travel and you drive a lot or you fly a lot like me, I'm constantly traveling to different events, speaking to various groups, and I'm either sitting in an airport or in a vehicle or something, and I don't want to, I would say, waste my time, but I love listening to audiobooks on the phone. So, kind of handy. Let me tell you a little bit about this book. First, why was I interested in even listening to this book? Well, it had a bright orange cover. That's always an eye catcher. Haha. But the whole concept of the book is smarter, faster, better. Well, who wouldn't want to be smarter, faster, better? Duhigg does a really good job of immediately opening the book and pulling you into the psychology of, okay, what's this going to be like? What am I going to get out of this book? And what's the value to me? And they do that immediately. Super solid. This book follows a standard, I would say, formula of modern motivational books where the author goes through, finds some very germane stories to the point they're trying to make, and then, okay, we toss those out and begin an analysis of those. So it's definitely, I would say, not a super deep method, but it's always effective. Every book that I've listened to or read that follows this formula seems to be pretty successful for me. So I've written some notes here and I want to talk to you a little bit about them. Classic motivational stories about airplane accidents. I don't know what it is about airplane accidents that seems to get people totally obsessed about motivation, but not crashing and blowing up and being blown to pieces in a big old fireball. That's pretty motivating for me. Duhigg came up with two differing examples of the cycle. They call it cognitive tunneling. Yes, cognitive tunneling. They use a lot of high-tech words, so you kind of got to roll with that. It really doesn't bother me. Some people it might bother. Let me tilt the camera just a bit. There we go. Yeah, so the theory of cognitive tunneling is that you get so absorbed in what you're doing, you get this focus. And now laser-like focus is very important when you're working on something. However, in a situation where things can go horribly wrong quickly, like, I don't know, a large Airbus flying through the air that weighs 440 tons moving 500 miles per hour, you don't have a lot of time if something goes wrong. So he brings up two very interesting stories about aviation. The first is a French flight on Air France. It was a flight 447. This was in 2009, and unfortunately ended in horrific tragedy. It was a flight from, I think it was Rio de Janeiro over to Paris, and so that they were lost in the middle of the ocean, and nobody really had a clue this flight was going along. All of a sudden, just completely disappeared. I was like, well, what happens? There have been a couple mystery flights in recent history. There was one over the southeastern Indian Ocean. I don't know if anything's even been found about that, but this flight that crashed in 2009, it took a couple years of submarines searching around to find out what the heck happened with that flight. And what they discovered is something went wrong with the autopiloting system. I don't remember the exact details, but that's not the point. And it forced the pilots to take over control. The main captain was off duty like he's supposed to because they're supposed to cycle out. And I believe it was the first officer got distracted. And when he was sitting there, he nosed up the plane ever so slightly. And there's no obvious reason why the pilot did this, or the co-pilot, flying the plane. And he started nosing the plane up and it began gaining altitude, and the plane starts acting funny because they were heading towards their maximum altitude at 39,000 feet, wherever they were. And the plane starts slowing down and stalling. Now, when you've got a huge Air France flight going up, eventually the atmosphere is going to get so thin that they lose all power and they begin plummeting. So the pilots freak out and the warning systems start going, the blaring, and all of a sudden they power up the plane to maximum power, And the pilot makes the co-pilot makes a critical mistake of, oh my gosh, I must be stalling, like he's going in for a landing, something's wrong. And what are you trained to do as a pilot? You're trained to pull up. That is the worst possible thing he could have done, because they were almost already in a stall condition. The plane's starting to shudder. People think on the plane that it's turbulence, but in fact the plane's starting to shudder because the wind's buffeting over the wings and causing that poor thing to shake. So he says, oh my gosh, I need to pull up even further. And the plane, instead of doing this, noses up and it begins flattening out. So even though those massive jet engines are blasting out power, they've got no speed. And then the plane goes like this and begins falling. And in a couple, 2-3 minutes, they fall from 39,000 feet all the way, and they hit the ocean. Apparently, just terrible, terrible thing to happen. But what happened was they got so absorbed on all the messages and the computer messages on the screen about do this, do that. And the problem is, when you have all those things, it's great, but it becomes overload because humans can only handle so much information. So you get this effect called cognitive tunneling, and you focus on this one thing and you completely ignore the cliff or the brick wall that you're driving towards. And that's what happened. Now, they compared this, Duhigg compared this to, oh crud, I didn't get the flight number. It was an Australian flight in 2010. It was an Airbus 380. And roughly similar circumstances, roll with me, not exactly similar, but one of the engines exploded on that 380, destroyed part of the wing, the hydraulic system, the fuel system, and that plane is literally coming apart in the sky. And unfortunately for the passengers, they had one of the little view cameras on the plane. They could see, like, oh my gosh, the plane I'm sitting on, when you see those views, they're pretty cool until you see your plane flying apart. And the pilot, what he did compared to the French pilots is he trained his crew as they were driving to the airport, and not like trained, but just drilled them on, okay, if this goes wrong, what do we do? If this goes wrong, what do we do? So they had a mental picture of what they would do when anything went wrong. And this is what happened to the French pilots, is they didn't have a mental picture of what that plane would do in various scenarios. The Australian pilot did that, so when things went wrong, he already had a mental plan and a gameplay of, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, and they didn't have to think on their feet as much. And apparently this Airbus 380 was the most damaged Airbus, I guess 380, the super huge one, to ever have successfully landed. They landed, I don't know how many tons overweight because they didn't have enough fuel to dump. Tires blew out. They only had 100 meters left on the runway. I mean, it was incredible. But just the whole concept of the idea is to tell you different ideas of, if you prepare and plan and train for these dangerous scenarios, you can make all the difference in your life and the lives of hundreds of other people. So the part of the system that Duhigg talks about there are two types of goals. One are SMART goals, one are stretch goals. SMART goals, I don't know if it's created by General Electric or GE, but the idea of a SMART goal, and this is two types of goals, is a SMART goal, or a very targeted goal, is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. If you don't have all those things in your goal, chances are that's just a blue sky dream fantasy, and you're never going to get there. If you don't make things very specific and by a specific date, your brain treats this as la la la. But one of the most critical things, and I was like, oh, this is simplistic. No, it's not. You gotta write this stuff down, because if you write this down, I'm going to do this by this date and this time, and you write it down and it's realistic. Like, am I going to beam to the moon tomorrow? No, probably not. Not realistic. But, hey, am I going to finish another demo video that I need to do by tomorrow? Write that down. All of a sudden, your brain starts treating this as, ooh, I need to do this. And you have to do it in positive present tense. And that's the only way your brain actually works to get things done. So you do that, you write those things down, and all of a sudden it engages your mind. So, and he talks much more in depth about that than I'm going to talk here. But the other type of goal is stretch goal of, the JFK, we're going to land on the moon by the end of this decade. I don't know, New England sort of speak. So you have very specific goals to get you along, but you got to have that super long vision to keep you going. Real critical. It's interesting, he talked about this poker player this woman poker player got into a huge tournament and she blew out everybody else because she started thinking about the psychology of how poker was played. She apparently, I don't know if she sat there with her glasses and ball cap. Any people that do that in a poker game where it's all a game of bluffing, you hide behind your glasses and your ball cap. I don't care, oh, I win all the time. No, you're not playing the game by the real rules. You're being weak there. So he really goes into that, how to psych out the other players, make them think that you're something different. It was an excellent analysis. Let's see, what else do we put? Oh, working as teams. He touched on a huge portion of working as teams is why do some teams succeed and other teams fail? He talked about the movie Frozen. I believe it's still the best grossing animated feature ever. And he talked about how the Disney system helped them through it. I don't know if that's actually totally true because there's always internal politics, but the idea of Frozen, it was totally off track. Things were going horribly wrong, but the people who were managing it made the right changes to kick the creative process and get it going. And so, I mean, when the film first came out in the internal release where the staff goes in and reviews and everybody comes away like, oh boy, this is a flaming wreck. We've only got 18 months to get this done and it's a wreck. Now, 18 months sounds long, but for a film like that, it's a very short time. Let's see, what I don't know. Freeman. Oh, yeah. Duhigg also touches on the classic motivation of the Toyota system of asking why things go wrong. If you have to ask why 6 times, and I don't think he actually talked about in the book, which is totally strange, but he talked about Toyota coming into the Fremont plant in California, one of the worst auto manufacturing plants in modern times in history, that it had horrible problems. People were on drugs, prostitutes. It was a terrible place. But Toyota came in and said, we're going to have a different philosophy. I think it was General Motors who owned it, and they're like, yeah, right, good luck. But they came in and they treated the employees like they actually mattered, and they give all employees the power to shut down the line. Now, GM's philosophy was that anybody that shuts down the line, every minute costs us $17,000. So you shut down the line, you're toast, you're out of a job. So there was a huge fear, and the head of Toyota, the CEO of Toyota, came to this guy, and he was trying to wrench on a taillight on the back of a car, and he wasn't doing it, and he's getting to the end of his cycle. And the CEO says, I can't remember the guy's name, please pull the handle, stop it, we'll fix the problem. And the guy's, oh, no, I can fix it. And he keeps fighting, and finally the CEO of Toyota comes over, grabs the guy's hand, pulls, and took it up to the handle and pulled it. And the line stops, and everyone's like, oh my gosh. And the guy's literally standing there shaking like, I am so fired, I am toast. And the CEO of Toyota was brilliant. And he said, Mr. Smith, working on the line, I'm very sorry we failed you. I did not make it clear to my management team of how important it is for you to be able to do this. He didn't do finger in the face of the guy on the line. He did the finger in the face of the management team, saying, look, you did not provide this guy with an understanding of how important it is to stop this line. Because originally Fremont, they would put out cars and there were problems. They would put the car out to the back lot, tear it apart, fix it, and then come back, and that's why the car's always rattled. And they thought, oh, this is better. No, it's worse. Because over time, those cars worked worse. Instead, stopping the line, yeah, you lose a little bit of money here, but then you prevent problems down the line. You don't have to tear the car apart, and you don't end up with many problems. So it's a totally different psychology. And Duhigg did a very good job of talking about that psychological safety for people. Now, that sounds a little fluffy-duffy, but it's actually really important to know that people can argue with you, but they'll still respect you and not insult you. It makes all the difference in working in teams in the world. I've worked at places that didn't have that, and woo, pretty brutal. So the time listening to this book, Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg, was well spent. If you want to understand more of the psychology of motivation and how it works and how you can apply it to your life, I've used some of these techniques in my polar exploration, my mountaineering, writing books. Oh my gosh. Very effective at getting you going. Definitely a 5-star on this book. Highly, highly recommend it. Check it out for a read or a listen. My name is Aaron Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer and motivational speaker. Please like and comment on the video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter at Linsdau. Thank you very much.